Welcome to the Everybody Matters podcast, a show dedicated to the idea that when organizations care enough to show their people that who they are and what they do matter, they unlock the only business idea with truly unlimited potential. I'm Brent Stewart, your host. This podcast is an outreach of Barry-Wehmiller. Don't forget to connect with us on the web at barry-wehmiller.com, on Twitter at Barry-Wehmiller, on Facebook and LinkedIn, and check out our blog, trulyhumanleadership.com. If you're counting along, last episode was our 50th episode, and we just want to thank everybody for listening and for your support of the podcast, for subscribing through Apple Music or your favorite podcast platform, and for sharing it with others. We appreciate your help in sharing the message of Truly Human Leadership and the difference it can make in our workplaces and in the world. On this episode, we're going to continue the conversation between myself, Mary Rudder, Barry-Wehmiller's Director of Global Messaging, and our CEO, Bob Chapman. On this episode, Bob covers a number of topics, including what has changed for Barry-Wehmiller since Bob's TEDx in 2013, how companies can truly do good in society, the importance of having a vision, what makes a great leader, the healthcare crisis and its relationship to the workplace, and what his father might think of Barry-Wehmiller today. And we'll start out with Bob talking about why it's important to give your people as much information as possible. Now again, here's Bob Chapman.
Well, let me use an example. Can you imagine playing a sport like basketball and there's no scoreboard? You're hired to play basketball, you run on the court, you run up and down, you pass the ball, you shoot some, they shoot some, but nobody ever tells you what the score is. So you work really hard to shoot as many baskets as you can, and but most of sports people can't. Why? I want to know what the score is. Are we behind? Are we ahead? Most people in business don't know what the score is. They're asked to do something. They don't understand what the financial information is kept private from them. I remember we acquired a company a few years ago, a family-oriented company, and most family-oriented companies say they're private, which means I'm not going to tell you how I did. And there was this lady running a department that generated quite a bit of revenue, and I said to her, "Ma'am," she'd been with this small family company for 30 years, and I said, "What are your revenue in your department?" And she said, "I don't know. They don't think I need to know." And I said, "You got to be kidding me." So I always say to you, would it be rewarding to play basketball? You might enjoy getting a couple of baskets in occasionally, and you might think maybe you're winning, but you're not sure. So I would say to you that one of the things we try to do is help people know the score, because people want to know if we're winning or if we're behind, what's our strategy to get ahead. That's part of the game to the very end. And so I would say to you, that's what I mean by that. People want to know. Privately held companies should share financial information, because how do their team members know whether they're creating value? Or are they just doing their job? You just do your job. I paid you to do your job. Don't worry about the financial results. I'll worry about it. I think that's very unfortunate and not respectful of the people. They want to know, are we winning or are we not winning? Not just, I'm an accounts receivable manager and I collect accounts receivable all day, but I have no idea how that fits in. So my goal eventually is to give everybody more visibility on whether they're winning and how what they're doing contributes to that winning game.
And that helps them feel more valued.
Right. Because they go home at night and they say, and they can actually talk to their family. How was your day? Well, nobody yelled at me. I didn't get fired. I didn't screw up anything. I mean, is that the way we want people going home? Well, that's the way most people walk home in most businesses today. They don't really know how they're doing. The expression that I hear all the time is, I got 10 things right and I never heard a word, and I got one thing wrong and I got my ass chewed out. And you can't believe the body language when I give a speech. The number of people feel that way. I made one mistake and I got my ass chewed out, but I've been doing this I never had a problem before, but man, they got on top of me. And that's so prevalent in business. So anyway, my view is that what we need to do is focus more on helping people know how they contribute to the overall success of the organization as best we can, which is a challenge, because normally, again, public companies don't like to share too much information because they don't want to get out to the public. Private companies think they're private, so they shouldn't have to share that, and we hire people in the jobs and they have no idea.
One other, I think, one thing that we haven't talked about yet, but it's another component to a lot of Barry-Wehmiller's success, especially recently, is the process of visioning. And I think you might have had an experience once, maybe with Cynthia or Kyle, a story that you've told that kind of illustrates that.
Yeah, when Kyle was very young, probably under 10, he was at taking a tennis lesson or something. And Cynthia said to him, and I don't know why it stuck to me this way, she said, Kyle, you need to see yourself hitting the ball. You need to visualize hitting the ball. Now you would think, what's the relationship with that in business? Well, that stuck with me for some reason. I don't know why. I've been very blessed with kind of a creative mind. And I came into business and I said, where are we going? Do we see where we're going? Are we just coming in and responding to stimulus all day? We got a problem here, we got an opportunity there, we got a need here. Because most people that I see in business focus their time on reaction to stimulus, problems or phone call or challenge. And without a vision, how do you make a decision? Well, you deal with this issue this way, this issue this. I believe the job of leadership is to have a vision of where you're going, why you want to go there, and when you get there, why will you have taken your people to a better place? I think as leaders, we are called to be stewards of those people and to be able to share that in a way that everybody understands their role in that process. And so from my standpoint, visioning is critical to a business. Where are you going? Not just how was your results this year, how was the month, where are you going? And do you understand the competitive landscape? Do you understand the dynamics of your market? Can you really talk about the fundamentals in a way that says, give me the ball, I know where we're going? And I think politically that when you see a politician who has kind of a vision for our country or our party, they're much more powerful than they just react to issues. I'm against this. And so I think visioning is a critical part of leadership. It's a critical part of what we do in this company. And when you combine it with economic value added EVA methodology developed by Stern Stewart, you can monetize the future and say, am I creating value in alignment with what are responsible expectations of our shareholders? So EVA methodology was a methodology developed by Stern Stewart studying publicly traded companies in terms of how the market values them over a period of time, getting rid of some of the emotion, the short term up and down. And we created that, and we as a way of valuing our stock so that everybody would know you can actually monetize all your initiatives and understand the economic impact of that. So it allowed people to relate to how you create value, because that's what we're in charge to do. People put their trust in us, they invest in us, people put their lives in our hands. And if we don't understand how we create value, how do you know where you're going? And how do you know what you're going to do in the future? And if you don't understand the competitive landscape, and I'd say that's one of our bigger challenges to get people to think that way, because we are, as a society, I think even in our homes, we tend to react to stimulus as opposed to shape our future. And I think that's one of the things that's allowed us to be more successful as we spend time pausing and thinking about what did we try that worked? What did we try that didn't work? What did we learn from that? And from what we learned, how do we shape a better future? That kind of continuous improvement cycle and applied to your business model so that people feel a sense of confidence that they can put their trust in you.
What's a good example of how visioning has made a difference in a Barry-Wehmiller business?
Our consulting company, Barry-Wehmiller Design Group, probably 12 or 15 years ago, we did what I call typical incremental budgeting. This year I made $1 million, next year I'm going to make $1.2 million, whatever the numbers are. And I was sitting down in the budgeting process with our consulting company, Barry-Wehmiller Design Group, and I could feel that kind of incremental, well, last year we did this, next year we could do that. And I said to the team, what if the potential of our consulting business was only limited by our ability to hire good people and to integrate them into our culture? That was the only limitation. There would be infinite demand for this consulting service of engineering consulting, because it's a huge field and we're a tiny factor. And so the only throttling factor would be how fast we could find good people and integrate them. And so Joe drew the line of kind of the incremental budgeting, which is 5%, 6% of your growth. And when he came back with how fast we could hire and integrate good people, which if that was your constraint, it almost doubled the projection of the company and scared Joe to death. And he kind of said, "There's no way, Bob." But guess what happened? Virtually every year thereafter, he hit that number, which was a well over 10% growth rate. Because we started thinking differently. We started doing things today so that 2 or 3 years from now, those things materialize. It changed the way we thought because we could take our vision and we could break it down by offering. We had the consulting platforms of facilities or control systems integration or process engineering. We could break it down. We could break it down by office. And I'd fly out to the Philly office, and Mike Bauer would say to me, my piece of the vision is growth of 20,000 hours, whatever the number is. And I know exactly how I can do it. I got to get 4 new clients. So all of a sudden, everybody was empowered by a piece of the map. But they knew the overall direction, and they knew their piece. And so it was powerful because now every place I went, everybody could talk to me about my piece of the vision is X, and I feel good about it. So it wasn't just some big, because the big number scared Joe. But when we broke it down, it was very, and they virtually hit their vision objective every year thereafter, except for the 2008-2009 downturn. But the beauty was that because we had all these growth fundamentals, then we hit the downturn, it took the growth out, but all the new initiatives offset the dramatic decline in some of the others. So it really worked out well.
It's been about 5 years since your TEDx. It was kind of a good kind of moment to kind of crystallize your leadership journey up to that point, the experiences that you had. In the 5 years since then, what are some things that you've learned?
Well, I think at the TEDx time, we felt that we were really blessed with a powerful message, but we didn't have much validation of that. It was just internally, we sensed this. In the last 5 years, the emergence of the Leadership Institute, the interaction we've had with some major corporations of the world, major thought leaders in terms of leadership, that we now realize that, well, it's my belief, my firm belief, that we were chosen by some higher power to show the world the way it was intended to be, the way we're intended to live and work together, where people go home each night knowing that who they are and what they do matters. And another piece of that, in addition to all the external validation with clients now that have asked us to help them be this major organization as the world asking us to be this way. The other piece is that when I gave the TEDx talk, we talked about sending people home fulfilled. But quite honestly, the revelation recently that a major health institution said that the person you report to at work is more important to your health than your family doctor, that shocks people when I say that. I just saw it. I just talked to a group of CEOs of hospitals, and their body language, it was just amazing, the reaction that they had. And that is startling. I don't think anybody ever given the opportunity to be a leader in an organization said, "Now, I just want you to understand something, that the way you're going to treat the 10 people, the 5 people, the 20 people, the 60 people under your care is going to profoundly affect their marriage, the way they raise their kids, and their health." You understand that? So they'd say, "Well, wait a second, I thought this was promotion where I got a nice car and a nice raise. You didn't tell me I was going to affect people's health and their family." And so what what we've learned is that the way we lead profoundly affects the way people live and profoundly affects people's health, which just puts fuel on the fire of the logic of our everybody matters, the extraordinary power of caring for people like family. We have ourselves in a healthcare crisis in this country. And I tell the CEOs I have the privilege of talking before, if you're complaining about the healthcare crisis, just look in the mirror. You are the problem. We are kind of self-destructing as a civilization. So I'd say to you that's some of the real advances, I think, in our message is that, A, it's been dramatically validated by some of the world's leading institutions. We first thought, gee, it's amazing. Everybody says, when they visited us, I've never seen anything like this. You need to share it with the world. But now that we have shared it with the world, we've seen it validated by people voting with their dollars and their time to hear this message and cause them to think about this message, that we've dramatically advanced our thinking in terms of the power of this message to kind of heal the hurt in this world. If every organization, traditionally called nonprofit, I like to call them for good organizations, and public and private institutions, if they would simply embrace the profound impact they make on people's lives, we could profoundly change the world as we know it. We tend to focus on political leaders solving our problems. It's constantly somebody running for office who tells you how they're going to solve your problems. There's only one place we can solve our problems, and it's within our span of control. If everybody simply cared for the people that we have the privilege of leading, we would profoundly change the world as we know it. And right now, it makes me sad to see young men and women enter the professional field knowing the way they're going to be treated and the way it's going to affect their health and their marriage.
There's a story that I always like you to tell, and you tell it every once in a while. And I don't think we've had you on the podcast saying it, but you had dinner with somebody once.
Yeah.
And you asked him what the thing he was most proud of in his company. Could you talk about that?
Yeah, probably now 7 or 8 years ago, there was a gentleman who was I'd gotten to know, very prominent gentleman, very wealthy gentleman in the private equity field, a really fine gentleman. And he had heard my speech someplace. I don't think he heard my TED Talk, but he heard, and he flew out to have dinner with me. And I don't even know what caused me to ask this question, because it was just kind of a dinner. And I said, "What are you really proud of?" He said, "Well, I'm known for my major gift to the college I went to, but what I'm really proud of is our minority student athletic scholarship program." I said, "Well, that's wonderful. How many minority student athletes do you help a year?" I think he said 6 or 8. I said, "Well, that's wonderful." I said, "I'm just curious, how many people work for your organization in the world? Do you think it's 100,000? He said, "Yeah, it's probably 100,000. I said, "So what you're telling me is you don't really care about those 100,000 people, but you really get a great deal of pride out of those 6 or 8. And he looked at me and he said, "I never thought about that." And my statement is always the greatest act of, we have a society where we celebrate leaders who write large checks to the United Way, the American Cancer Society, other events. And aren't they wonderful people? What a wonderful institution. And as a gentleman who came out to speak that I heard about, who said, "While we do good in the world, could we do less harm?" And what he meant was, it's wonderful to write those checks to charities. We genuinely appreciated the generosity. But how did you get your money? How did this gentleman I met get his money so he could help those minority students? And I say the greatest act of charity is not the checks you write, but the care for the people you have the privilege of leading, who give you the opportunity to have the wealth to write that check. And so that's my focus, is that if we would see our greatest act of charity, the people we had the privilege of leading, not the checks we write in the society, we'd have a dramatically different society.
It's lately there's been kind of some a little bit of reflection this year, passing of your mom, and then the great opportunity to with the project in Shaw Park, which was dedicated to your parents. You came in to the business, your dad wanted somebody who he could trust in the business, and then you were kind of thrust into the leadership role when your dad passed. What do you think that he'd think of the company now, and all the different parts of the company, the leadership message, the way our people feel, and the way people feel about our company?
Well, the way I'd like to answer that question is 5 or 6 years ago, I was at dinner. Some lady, very nice lady, sat next to me, and I always say I'm too old for trivial conversations. So I was challenging her about what she was going to do with her life, and she looked at me and threw an equally good challenge, and she said, "What do you think heaven looks like?" I've never had anybody ask me that, so I hadn't really thought about it. And so I thought a minute, and I said, to answer your question, I think heaven would look like sitting down with my dad and explaining to him what happened to this company that he tried for 23 years to give a future to, but struggled to keep it alive when he joined the company. And when I was thinking about that, people will say to me, well, I'm sure he knows, with us, people with faith would say, well, he knows. I say, yeah, but I want to see his face. I want to see him say, you got to be kidding me. Because, I was not a kid that he thought had turned out too well, which he was probably more right than wrong, given my high school and early college experience. And B, that he'd spent 23 years trying to keep this company alive and give it a future and just couldn't break it out of the kind of the historic rut it was in. And so I use the analogy, it'd be like us sitting here and seeing the moon and saying, wouldn't it be amazing to be like the original astronauts to land on the moon? I mean, just can you imagine even landing on the moon, sitting on the moon when you see it up there? And then the next evening we're sitting around having a beer together and we look around, why is it so dusty here? And we look and say, wait a second, we're on the moon. How in the hell did we get on the moon? And that's honestly the way I feel. When you understand kind of what we talked about in the brokenness of the 80s, where we couldn't pay a bill, that we're in an old industry with old technology, and we sit here today with people putting their faith in us and believing in us, and the stories being written about us, the amazing opportunity to share it through the book, through the TEDx talk, through the speeches we get to give today. It is joy beyond words. But clearly, I would love to see my dad's face, because there's no way since he's already dead, I can't kill him twice, but they would kill him. I mean, he would die. He'd think he'd say, oh my God. I mean, he wouldn't even imagine, because he spent 23 years trying to get it out of this rut. He kept it alive, but he couldn't break the pattern. To think of it's a $3 billion company today with the caliber of investors we have today and the faith people put in us and the talks and the way it's helped his family and other people, it'd be like landing on the moon to him, beyond your imagination. This is beyond my wild. We had a goal of getting to 100 million in 1988 to get to 100 million, and that plan that we had to get to 100 million got us to this year will be about 3 billion.
So, and then if he looked at you and said, "Okay, how'd you do it? How'd you do it?" and you had give us your elevator pitch on how'd you make that happen?
Oh, I asked my mom. I used to ask my mom before she had Alzheimer's. I said, "Mom, what do you think you did with me?" And she said, "I have no idea." She did. Because she just liked me as a kid, but she had no feeling I had any potential. And the simple answer is that I would say to you, to my dad, that somehow I was blessed with the ability. I'm an eternal optimist. In the worst of times, I never gave up. I could always see tomorrow, and I come in every day enthusiastic to go to the next day. And I was able to see value where other people were not, because there was no elements of traditional value left to see. So if I didn't find some nuances of value that nobody else had seen. So I would say to you, that is what has driven our company to today. I'd say, Dad, that I was given not intellectual intelligence, but common sense. I just have the ability to see things other people can't see and come up with creative solutions. And I personally don't think you can be a great leader without being an optimist. I think a great leader gives the people in their care a grounded sense of hope for a better future. That is our responsibility. And I don't think people understand that. We don't teach that, but that's our responsibility, is to give the people in our care a grounded sense of hope for a better future and be able to articulate it. And because people put their faith in us. Do they decide to have a child? Do they have enough job stability financially they can afford a child? Can they buy a home? Can they buy a car? When you hear the stories in our book where somebody, lost their job, couldn't afford their child, was collecting aluminum, Ken Coppins. It really takes seriously when every time you hire somebody that they're putting their faith in you.
If you'd like to find out more about Bob Chapman and Ross Zodia's book, Everybody Matters, The Extraordinary Power of Caring for Your People Like Family, go to everybodymattersbook.com. For updates on the book, this podcast, and to get a lot of great content and insight, don't forget to connect with us on the web at Barry-Wehmiller.com, on Twitter at Barry-Wehmiller, on Facebook and LinkedIn, and check out our blog, trulyhumanleadership.com. I'm Brent Stewart. Thanks for listening, and don't forget, Everybody Matters is the only business idea with truly unlimited potential.